There's growing concern over the sharp rise in spam as well as scam calls across the country. Consumers say they're being bombarded daily, with some calls even posing serious financial risks. Regulators are under pressure to tighten controls as experts warn the trend is not only an annoyance, but a growing security threat. A test run by Business Tech on one of its mobile phones indicated that between 80% and 90% of calls to the number were spam. 80 to 90%. Can you believe it? For more on this, let's speak to Master Data Management's Managing Director, Gary Allemann, who joins us now. Gary, that's a good morning to you. Hopefully when we called you, it didn't feel like you were being spammed because we certainly weren't meaning to. But, I mean, I thought the POPI Act was meant to stop the trading of people's personal data. And yet, it just seems to be getting worse. What's happening?
Morning, Arabella, and morning to our viewers. Yes, remember we've had legislation for many years in terms of the Consumer Protection Act before the POPI Act that was meant to stop abuse of your contact information. And unfortunately, I agree with you. You know, it's getting worse. And in fact, I actually read an article yesterday that saying that voice calls are practically dying because nobody answers their phone anymore because, as you said, actually 90% of the time, if it's an unknown number, it's a spam call. So really, it is a huge issue.
So what is actually happening? Why are we seeing this rise happen across the board here? Is it because businesses are maybe becoming a little bit more desperate, or there are more nefarious characters and more people who are wanting to ultimately scam and spam you?
Look, I think businesses at the end of the day have to make some kind of marketing efforts, and clearly they feel that telephone calls work. What's become particularly annoying in recent times is, for me, is robot callers that, you know, it's not even a person on the end of the line. But the bottom line is that as long as we keep answering the calls and keep, you know, responding to the advertisements, you know, we respond to whatever it is they're trying to sell, and they get sufficient response to justify the cost, they're going to do it. Now, there are options we have in terms of reporting abuses, but more needs to be done from the regulator side. And I think for most of that, you know, to try and report 8 or 9 calls a day is just onerous. So that's why it's happening.
Yeah, Gary, while we're on this conversation, I actually want to bring in a chart that I found very interesting. It is a little bit old, one must admit. Number one, we'll show you the poll question that we're asking, which is, you know, do you see spam calls or as just an annoyance or a serious security threat? That's something we're asking our audience who are voting on this today. And 89% of votes thus far have just said that it's a violation of privacy. Right, so it kind of tells you a clear sense of, you know, how impactful this is. There's even a 1% though who say they don't care. But what I also wanted to bring in was another chart which I found very interesting, and let me explain this chart because it's from Truecaller and it does relate primarily to around 2019, 2020. But I still think it bears a lot of relevance and truth right now. 39% of the spam calls we get are from scammers. Right, that's what that data is showing. 28% are from insurance companies, with an 11% figure coming through from telemarketing services. Other operators occupy around 10%, and then we have financial services coming in at 8%, market research taking in some portion, with debt collectors taking another portion, a very tiny one there too. But just seeing that scam at 39%, how do we actually stop that then when you have ways in which we're supposed to be able to do away with it, whether it be some of these applications, but you have acts and regulations in place? Is it because we don't have sufficient law enforcement, or are there just too many loopholes?
Well, I think scamming is really more down to education of us as individuals. So, you know, if somebody phones you asking you for your bank details, or I mean, I know people that will give away their PIN codes, you know, for payments on a phone call to somebody claiming to be from the fraud department of a bank, for example. So if anybody's asking you for information that is financial in nature, that requires you to give away a PIN code, that requires you to, you know, move money into an account somewhere, it's 99% of the time it's going to be, in fact, not 99.9% of the time it's going to be a scam. You should never be giving out that kind of information. So I think there's, the challenge with scams is that people fall for them because they sound realistic. They're often targeting the elderly or other individuals that don't understand the risk that they're putting themselves
Gary,
under.
let me
And
interrupt
it's an
you.
education issue.
Gary, I'm so sorry. I'm going to interrupt you. We're speaking right this very moment. I've just gotten a spam call. Literally this very moment. I've just gotten a spam call myself. And I think that's the key worry here, is that it's not as if it's just something that's happening out of the ordinary and just out of the blue here. And so now you're then instituting, popular apps that would be able to hopefully help with all of this. But it doesn't take them away, right? Does this mean that, and I don't know what it means about phone calls in general. I know earlier you spoke about voice calls ultimately dying, but does that mean communication as a whole is going to look different for companies, for ourselves, and the entire ecosystem might be changing?
Well, as a simple example, what you guys did when you set up this call is you WhatsApped me first to tell me who it was, what it was about, and then you placed the call afterwards. I think that's happening more and more. People are moving to WhatsApps and other channels. But I also think there needs to be more regulation on the actual service providers. And I'm talking about, the Vodacoms, the MTNs, the Cell Cs of the world, because ultimately, if you're seeing a number that is being used to make large numbers of calls to different numbers, it's pretty obvious that that's some kind of marketing or some kind of spam thing. And the operator should be able to do something about it. And certainly for email providers block spam, email that is being used abusively. And I see no reason why mobile operators shouldn't be doing the same thing. But again, as long as they can make money out of it and they're not going to get penalized, they'll continue to do that.
Yeah. Look, one must give kudos to our producer there, Lopang Mugai, who is the one who then institutes a text-first basis and then calls you so that you're aware that that call is coming. So kudos to her on that one. I wanted to also then just ask if you believe that South African companies are doing enough, however, to secure customer data and track consent. Because it's the trading, or the unlawful trading in some ways, of personal data, which has created some parts of this. Are they doing enough, do you think?
Look, I think that they are doing more and more, and it's not a generic statement that you can say they're all doing enough. There are some operators out there that simply are bad actors, and I don't want to mention names because it would be unfair of me. I'm going to be guessing, but what you have the right to do when you get a call from somebody is to actually ask them, where did you get my information from? And they are actually legally obliged to tell you. And what typically will happen at that point is they will hang up. So you can find out in theory, legally you're entitled to find out who sold you my information or who gave you my information, so that you can then take action against that party, because they should not be sharing the information unless you've given them explicit permission to do so. And it has historically been, unfortunately, people like some of the mobile operators or some of the larger institutions that have sold information onwards. So you do have a right to understand who's sharing your information, and then, vote with your feet. Don't do business with those companies. So I think we as consumers need to take action to protect ourselves. But also corporates need to take action to protect data internally from abuse by internal parties that have access to the data, and that might be behind their backs and against their policies sharing information. So they need to take more action in terms of securing their own data, particularly from unauthorized or abuse of internal access.
Just looking forward, let's talk about regulatory or even technical collaborations that may need to happen between the likes of ICASA, mobile operators that you've also been speaking about, data management firms, in order to truly stamp out spam calling. Because while there's a clear understanding of companies that do need to make phone calls to get a hold of clients or to at least create interest in clients, trying to regain that trust is going to be very difficult without the right kind of education and informative basis here as well, and trust.
Correct. It becomes a challenge because I do understand the need for businesses to market their goods. And, every now and again, out of 1 in 1,000 spam calls is actually something that you think, oh, yes, that's quite useful. I think the challenge honestly becomes the sheer volume of calls. You get calls back from people. So another thing that you can do when you receive a call from somebody, say, look, put me onto your do not call list. And then legally, they're actually supposed to put a marker against your name or an indicator against your name that says this client has, or this prospect has said, please do not call me. and legally they may not call you after that point. And the unfortunate thing is that they do tend to continue to call you even when they've been asked not to. So that's when maybe one needs to think about taking it to the regulator and reporting them, which you can do via a form on the website. Or escalate it internally with the company, demand to speak to a supervisor. There are people in those businesses whose responsibility is to keep customers happy and to understand that they are actually, obeying the law with regard to poppy.
So
but
beyond,
unfortunately, in many cases now, they're still ignoring it.
Yeah, so beyond speaking just directly to the person that's calling you, is there other recourse that we have? Is it just a conversation that we can have, an email that we can send, a phone call to the regulator that we can complain about this
well,
too?
There's a form, I think, on the regulator's website that one needs to fill in to actually, officially lay a complaint. But I would suggest in most cases, before doing that, go to the company itself and look for their information officer. They will have somebody responsible for papaya compliance, and try laying a complaint through that channel as well, or before going into the regulator, so that they can at least take action to clear things up, and that may be quicker.
Gary, it's one where we'll continue to have to just press block, and more block. Thank you so much for the time, though.